A look back at Clara with Tara.
Hello there and welcome to the first episode of Clara Looks Back with me, Tara McGrath. Over recent years there's been an increased interest and appreciation in Clara's heritage as seen in the popularity of the Tommy Harris series of photo books and the Facebook pages of both Clara Past and her own Clara Heritage Group. To kick off this February podcast, I'm going to go right back to the 4th century when Ireland was a lot different than it is today. St. Patrick is busy getting rid of snakes and spreading the word of God via the humble shamrock, and there's a new kid, or rather a new woman on the block, namely St. Brigid. St. Brigid, whose feast day is the 1st of February, is Clara's patron saint and is believed to have been born around 451 near Dundalk in County Louth. St. Brigid is reputed from an early age to have performed many miracles, including the healing and feeding of the poor. She was also renowned for her kindness and had a tendency in giving away her father's property to those less fortunate than herself. So much so that her father sought to marry her off to the King of Leinster as soon as he could. However, on the night her father arranged to marry her off, he left her outside minding his chariot while he went inside to speak to the king, only to find when he returned that she'd given away his sword to a passing beggarman. The King of Leinster was so impressed by Brigid's kindness that he declined to marry her, and instead her father agreed that she could devote her life to God instead. It is said that St. Brigid received her veil from St. Mel of Ardagh at Fartulla just outside Kilbeggan and began straight away working on establishing her first convent. According to folklore, St. Brigid approached a local chieftain asking for a parcel of land on which to build her convent. The chieftain was reluctant to give her any land until St. Brigid said she only needed the land her cloak would cover. Looking at the scrap of cloth wrapped around her shoulder, the chieftain knew it wouldn't be much, and so he agreed. With that, St. Brigid instructed 4 of her followers to take a corner of her cloak each and walk away from each other. To the amazement of those present, the cloak continued to grow until enough land was covered to house her convent. This, her first convent, was situated in a quiet valley just north of Ohamore beside Enon Bog and became known as Kilbride Abbey in her honour. A holy well dedicated to St. Brigid is situated close to Kilbride and was reputed to cure toothache, but sadly it has been long since abandoned. Like all good women, St. Brigid was a successful multitasker. She is billed as the patron saint of babies, blacksmiths and boatmen, cattle, farmers, children, dairymaids, dairy workers, fugitives, Ireland, Leinster, mariners, midwives, milkmaids, nuns, poets, the poor, poultry farmers, poultry raisers, printing presses, sailors, scholars, travellers and watermen, to name but a few. Following the establishment of her abbey at Kilbride, St. Brigid moved on to other convents, including Kildare. However, Kilbride's importance over the year as a religious site remained strong, as is evident by the marriage of key local chieftains, the McGagans of Mycashel and the Foxes of Teffia, in the convent of Kilbride in the 1500s, and later the inclusion of Kilbride Abbey in the Downshire maps created in the 1600s. As it predates the Reformation, Kilbride Abbey is a mixed graveyard. It contains the remains of both Catholic and Protestants. Notable graves include Holmes of Ballycumber, whose son played a role in the death of the famous Ballycumber tree in 1798, Mert Daly, Edward Feeney and Michael Conway. The oldest known graves date back to the mid-1700s, including those of John Ball of Ball's Hill, located close to Chapel Hill, and Father Travers, one of Clara's earliest known priests. Although the Abbey at Kilbride is no longer in use as a burial ground, the connection between Clara and St. Brigid remains as strong some 1600 years later, with our parish church, our credit union and girls' school all named in her honour. Both Clara GA clubs' emblems feature the famous St. Brigid's cross, and in the 1940s Clara Soccer Club was known as St. Brigid. A look through the 1901 and 1911 census showed how much St. Brigid was considered in Clara, with over 140 names starting with Bridgie, Bridget or Breed. Thanks to the works of the Kilbride Abbey Preservation Group and the ongoing works of Clara Heritage Group, including our 4-legged eco-friendly groundskeeper, Kilbride Abbey is accessible to everyone who wants to visit and trace the footsteps of our nation's second saint. If you'd like to find out more about Kilbride or Clara Heritage in general, please check out our Facebook page at Clara Heritage Group. Coming up next podcast, we look at the 140th anniversary of Charles Stewart Parnell and his Monster Rally in Clara in 1881. Slán agus Bannacht.
A look back at Clara with Tara.